Hey BookTube, it's Jackie. How's it going? If you're new to me, it's the first time you're seeing my face. Hello, what's up? My name's Jackie. I sit on my floor and I talk about books. So I hope that's why you're here, because that's what's going to be happening today. If you are not new to me, thank you for always tuning in, the continued support. I really do appreciate it. So today for you, I have a review on Andrew Tweedale's Of All the Faiths and None, and it looks like this. This is an advanced reader copy, or an ARC, from Reads Discovery. Reads Discovery is a company that reached out to me about a month and a half ago to be a video reviewer for them, and I got to choose out of a list of books, and this is the very first one I chose. It was the one that spoke to me the most of the time, and I am very honored to give you guys this review on a book that hasn't even been on the shelves yet. So without further ado, grab yourself a drink, have yourself a seat, and let's get talking about Andrew Tweedale's Of All the Faiths and None and visit a lost generation of the Great War. Okay, so a little background about this book. I did receive this through Reads Discovery. I will have all the links to my page on Reads Discovery, Rediscover book choices. I will have all the links down below in the down box below, so please go check them out. The site's really easy to use, it's really easy to function around, and I've had a good time playing with it. So just want to get that out of the way right now. The release date for Andrew Tweedale's Of All the Faiths and None, and I really hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. If I am not, sir, I apologize. But I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. I'm very, very sorry. I'm really bad with pronouncing names. This set release date is for September 15th, 2022. So if you are seeing this after that date, go check this out. If that date is not surpassed yet, then if you want to check this out, you will have to wait. I just want to get that out of the way. All right, a few stats about this book. This is historical fiction set around World War I, or AKA the Great War. So this is World War I historical fiction. A very narrow field, but there's a lot within that field to play with. It does show graphic depictions of wartime violence, injuries, and experiences. I want to say experiences because there is more to war than just the battles. There is the emotional carnage that is involved, and this is graphically displayed in this book. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were all aware that there is violence, there is graphicness, and there is emotional damage in this book. There is some very minor graphic language. The F-bomb is dropped a few times, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, it's pretty par for the course in language. There is some triggers for domestic abuse, very little, but it is there, so please be warned about that. And this book is told from what as I'm reading it, the way I felt was in a very episodic way. So you do have blocks of time. The transitions, it's not really transitioned as well as I thought it was going to be set up as, but that's completely fine. That is an author's choice of writing, but it works out. Once you figure that out, it goes a lot smoother. But if you weren't aware of that ahead of time, you'd feel like you're missing things. And I did feel like I was missing things until I realized that he's doing it in like an episodic, like an episode. They tie together, but they have their own separate entities of each section of the book. All right. Why did I choose this book? Out of all the books I could have chosen, why did I go with this one? Well, I chose this one because of this cover. I love this cover. I think it's stunning. It's so simplistic. It's so poignant to the story, which I didn't know until I read the story. But it's a stunning cover, and I really hope this is the cover that gets released with this book, because if it changes, it better be something great, because I think this is beautiful the way it is. And that's actually one of the main reasons why I chose this book. And then, of course, I read the synopsis of it written by the author, and then I was like, yeah, I gotta read this. But my initial reaction was drawn to this cover. The simplicity of this white feather, I wanted to know what it meant. I knew it meant something, but I didn't know what it meant. And honestly, I thought it was a quill at first. And then I realized, I'm like, this is about World War I. This is not a quill. All right, so what is this about? But it drew me in. The soft greens, the hand holding this delicate feather, the delicate fingers of the hand, it spoke to me on a level that I don't really understand what that level is, but I couldn't take my eyes off this cover. So I kept coming back to it and coming back to it. And I said, this is it. This is the one I'm doing. So it's actually, the cover is the reason I originally chose this book. And then I got to the summary of the book, which I am going to read directly what the author wrote as the summary. The only thing that I have done is removed parts that I think might be considered spoiler for the book. But other than that, this is exactly what I read, which drew me into this book. In 1910, Edwin Lutyens, which I hope I am saying that correctly, the architect receives a letter from Sir Julius Drew for the commission of a castle on Dartmoor, Castle Drogo. His daughter Celia becomes enamored with the project. Celia meets Sir Julius's children, Adrian, Christian, and Basil, and becomes infatuated with Adrian, who is driven by a sense of duty and honor. The novel moves to 1914 and the Great War, where faith and love are stretched to their limits, as each character is affected by the relentless brutality of the war. Of All Faiths and None is the story of a lost generation. It is a novel that focuses on the romance of the characters until those relationships are shattered. It is a coming-of-age tale and a commentary on the tragedy of a needless war. I could not have summarized this book better than that. That is stunning. That is exactly what this book is. And it was perfect. So that's the only reason I had to read exactly what the author wrote, because I could not have summarized it better. The final paragraph, where it says love is stretched to their limits and each character is affected by the relentless brutality of the war. That is what this book is. This book is a lifetime. It's not just a moment in time. We do have a lot of time jumps in this book, but it is a span of time, and you get to see the growth and change in all these characters that we encounter and how they intersect and how they break apart. And the commentary on a tragedy of needless war that is definitely invoked within this book on both sides. I want to emphasize that the author does a really good job of not imbuing a one-sided claim on this war. It is brought forth on both sides of this war, for and against. Okay, so what worked in this book? The historical context. That is a big thing with me with historical fiction, as I love historical fiction. It's a big deal. If the history is not there, if it's not utilized correctly, then it just, what's the point? To pick a different scenario. But no, Andrew Tweedale did a really good job of making the historical context a major player in this book. It was a character in and of itself. Some areas I want to point out within this is the author's note. In the author's note, Andrew Tweedale said that he had mentioned visiting the Castle Drogo and believing it was a great place to set the novel. It was. Castle Drogo is stunning. It looks like this. Castle Drogo is a real castle. It was the last castle built in England by Edward Lutyens. I hope I am saying that correctly. And it is a beautiful castle with the stone lion above the door, which is referenced in this book. So having something that I can physically look at and physically touch, if I ever got to that point, if I ever got there to see it, it's amazing. Having that in books is so awesome. And it is one of the most beautiful things about historical fiction is that they use actual history as the backdrop. But like I said, this was a major character. This was taking place during the Great War. This war was a major, major player in the story that affected the lives of all of our main characters. And it is a vengeful character, and it is a ruthless one, and it doesn't give a crap who you were or what your relationship status is or your social standing. It was holding no punches. So it was definitely the villain and the catalyst for this story. So very much a major, major player in the story. And I love when historical fiction takes what is going around societally, historically, and just jams it down your throat in the book, because I'm a history person. So I really, really enjoy that aspect of this. His use of battle techniques, the chemical weaponry, and the firearms used during World War I, you could tell that this man really did his research. He was on point with it. He didn't get into a lot of scientific detail, but he gave you just enough detail to actually grasp what was going on, get you familiarized with what his characters were experiencing, and it was all accurate. The description of the trench warfare and the lice-ridden trenches and the sinking in the mud and the gas pouring in and burning. It just, he did amazing with that. Oh, those sections remind me back being in history class, my college days, reading about first-time accounts of journals of the trench warfare, the soldiers in the trenches. Oh, it was just on point, dude. That was stunning. He nailed it with that stuff. Nailed it. It was so, so good. Really, really appreciated that a lot. Enough so that I'm actually recommending this to my dad, who's very, very particular about firearms and armaments during World War I and World War II novels. He's very particular when he reads his fiction about historical, about world wars, about the accuracy of that, and I think it was on point, and so I think he'll really enjoy it as well. So you proved enough for me that I could pass it along to someone who collects firearms of that genre and of that time frame. So definitely nice. And the last one I really want to point out is the Order of the White Feather. This is something that I did not know anything about. I never heard about this. I never saw it, never read about it, never seen it in a movie. I don't think I've even heard it referenced. So when I read about that in this book, I was intrigued. I was like, what is this? It allowed me to further my own personal research in World War I and everything surrounding it. And I love that. I love a historical fiction book that will bring out actual historical things that I've never heard about and just allow me to expound my own historical repertoire of knowledge. It's just, oh, that was awesome. That was so exciting. Oh, that was exciting. That was a great moment because when that scene comes up, I was like, what is this? Now, I also recognize that this is the moment where the cover comes into play, and I loved that tie-in. Loved it. That was great because I was starting to wonder how this cover was going to be applicable to this book, and then I saw it with this. But I wanted to further my research on it. The way he utilized it, the way he described it in the story, I was like, what? They did not do that. I mean, they did some crazy back then, but really? Really? They actually did that? And they did. And I was floored. I was like, why have I not seen movies with this in it? Because this is definitely dramatic. It is kind of mean. Not even kind of, it's straight up mean. It is nothing but a guilt trip. And yeah, I was floored by that moment. So I loved the historical context used in this book because not only did it give me something that I physically could go see one day, it gave me great detail, but not so much that I felt like I was reading a textbook. At the same time, it also gave me little tidbits of history that I didn't know that I could further my research. It hit all the major good points for historical fiction for me. I love when that trifecta is hit. That is the trifecta right there. Loved it. The societal expectations in regards to duty and honor that he portrayed in this book. This is a heavy, heavy theme in this book, and you see it with every single character in one form or another. When we have the quick enlistment of Adrian, a war is on, I need to honor my country, I need to sign up for it, it doesn't matter what I think, I need to do this. Then you have the delayed reservation side with Christian, the middle brother, who's like, this really isn't my war. I don't feel like I need to do this. And then you have the guilted with the Order of the Feather, where young women would walk around and hand off a young feather to a man and say, you're a coward because you're not in uniform. You have all these societal expectations of this duty and honor. Should you honor yourself and what your own person believes, or should you follow blindly into what your country says? It is a ideal. It is something that we struggle with even today. And all war times have struggled with. It's just something that people can relate to. And I definitely did relate to it very, very much in this book. So I loved that Andrew Tweedale had given us all the aspects of this inner torment that we as people do experience on a continuous basis. Even if it's not in regards to wartime, just duty and honor in general to ourselves or to our family or to our livelihoods. It's something that we struggle with. And I loved how he displayed the struggles with his characters and he showed both sides. I love when authors show both sides. It's important because you get the whole story. As someone who is very much into history, you want that whole story. You want every little kernel you can get, because then you can formulate your own opinion. And historians, we're diggers. We like to dig and peel apart and see all the layers, and that's one of the fun parts of being a historian, but it's really nice when an author just lays it out for you, so you don't really have to go through that much digging. You can just have the pieces there to figure it out yourself, especially when it's for free reading and a hobby. So another societal expectation that was definitely shot out here in regards to duty and honor was marriage and inheritance. The women were not exempt from the duty and honor in his book, and I loved that. Loved it. Loved it. We have a character who is marrying someone because she feels she has to. And then we also have a character who doesn't get to marry who she wants, and she can't marry for love because it is not what needs to happen to involve inheritances and things of that nature. And then we have further events that involve her that didn't see coming, but I really was glad that was put in there, because just how that type of topic was handled. And I am not going to talk about it because it is a spoiler for the book, but just know that there's nobody safe in this book. There's nobody safe from heartache or pain or duty and honor at all. So yes, I loved it. I loved it. The historical context, societal expectations were there. Fantastic. Now, the wartime scenes in this book, I have to talk about these. These were awesome. Oh my God. I felt like the first time I read All Quiet on the Western Front when I was reading the battle scenes. It was so reminiscent of that. And this might be a negative opinion, but All Quiet on the Western Front is one of the epitome World War I books. Is it not? Is it completely necessarily accurate? You know, there's debate, okay? But for me, that was one of the first World War I books that I ever read that just, it fucking hit home for me. I mean, it hit, and it hit hard. And this book hit just as hard with those scenes. Oh my God. Oh, the trench scenes with our characters, and then the fire scene with Christian. Oh my God. I am not grossed out by a lot of stuff. I have a pretty thick stomach, or steel-lined stomach. I can handle a lot. I can handle gore. I can handle graphic. I can handle a lot of crap. But there is something that I can't handle, and it's stuff to involve with eyeballs. Oh my God, the fire scene with Christian, about lost it. Lost it. I had to put it down. Had to put it down, dude. Had to put it down, because that was just like, oh God, that's a trigger for me. Oh God. But it was so good, because his rise after that, and just his story arc after that. I loved it. I loved it. I was grossed out, but I loved it. I loved every single second of the battle scenes. They were so descriptive. They were so engrossing. It dug in, and the constant talk of lice. I had to take so many showers because I felt like I could feel it. It was, oh my God, it was so gross. It was so, But those are the things you want in a book. And Andrew Tweedale delivers that. He delivers you this physical embodiment of what is going on. That is how descriptive his wartime scenes are. I mean, he nailed it with those. Nailed it. Oh, those were so freaking good. So good. I cannot speak highly of those. Those were fantastic. All the connections with the characters, and we have our crossovers, because for a while they're all kind of separated, and then they all kind of come back and join again, but then they're separated again. I loved seeing all the ties in with all these different characters. It was like this nice little thing like this. It was great. It was stunning. Really well done. You can tell that this man was definitely paying attention to where he left people off and picking right back up, or not even acknowledging what happened, because that's how people are sometimes. We don't even acknowledge what happened in the past. We just kind of move on, pretend it didn't fucking happen. So I loved it. I loved all of those moments. For as serious and as emotional as this book is, there's a lot of humor in it. There is a lot of unique humor moments, and I really, really enjoyed that. It helped lighten the story a little bit. because this is a lot of heavy, depressing, painful, emotional material, but to have a little bit of this humor thrown in. Now, granted, it is very relationship style humor, but to have it thrown in, it definitely was appealing, and it broke up some of, I don't want to say monotony, because this book wasn't monotonous, but it broke up the constant barrage of emotional pain that this book has. It was definitely well enjoyed, so I'm glad he threw that in there as kind of like an Easter egg for us guys over here that, like have our hearts ripped out and stomped on. Thank you. Appreciate that. I enjoyed the reprieve. Another element that I want to bring to the forefront that really worked in this book is the beliefs for and against war, both demonstrated, and the change of the views as the war progressed and clearly laid out. I said this prior that in his summary, he said it's a commentary on the tragedy of a needless war. It is a commentary, but it is a commentary on both sides. You see both viewpoints clearly displayed, and then you see both viewpoints clearly changed by the end of the novel to its reverse. And I appreciate that, because people went into this war thinking one way, and then they saw the carnage and the horror and the ghastliness of it, and their viewpoints changed. While others who felt one way, by the end felt a completely different way, like they had a sense of duty to stand up and fight because of the length of the war. I loved how he clearly laid that out within our characters. I appreciate that, because I got both sides. It wasn't a one-sided novel, and I really appreciate when authors do that, because it means they are above their own viewpoint and they can acknowledge the fact that people are going to have different opinions, and he wants everybody to be inclusive in this book. So give us both viewpoints, but then show us how both viewpoints changed. I loved it. I love that he did that. Gutsy move, and I appreciate it immensely. And the last thing that worked, and maybe this is because I'm slightly masochistic, but there was this feeling of loss invoked with the story, and I fucking loved it. Oh my God. The feeling of just hopelessness, loss, pain, it is just all laden through this book. And sometimes I don't mind not having happiness. Life isn't always cheery and happy. I mean, how many times have you been broken up with and went and listened to sad songs? You're already sad, but we listen to sad music just to know that someone else feels like that. And to have a book that makes you feel the same pain as these characters, I love it. I love books that can invoke a whole range of emotions in you, but when they focus on one, and it's not the one that people really think you should have, authors that do this, they're gutsy, they're ballsy, they're brilliant, they're intelligent, they understand the human condition, that we have to feel these things. And I loved it. I love that he was not scared to invoke this sense of loss and hopelessness that World War I created. World War I, it's the Great War, but it's also the lost generation. We lost a whole generation of people. And you should feel that. And this book makes you feel it and reminds you of it. And it's just, the way he did it was stunning. I loved it. Loved every single second of that. That was great. Made me cry. Made me feel my heart got ripped out and stomped on. But I loved it. But there were a few items in this book that did not work, and I want to talk about those. So what didn't work? I am a history person. I majored in history, so I like history. For me, this was not an issue, but I can imagine this for someone who just enjoys historical fiction, but they're not really big into actual history. They rather just get into the story. This book did start off kind of slow. It wasn't until about midway that I was really sucked in. And when I mean sucked in, I mean I could not put it down. I didn't want to put it down. I was thinking about it constantly when I wasn't reading it, and that was about the halfway mark. I had to actively remind myself to pick this book up in the first part of the book. And there are 10 parts in this book. So we're talking about part 4, part 5 is when this really started to hit me, that I'm like, I'm engrossed in this story. And truth be told, it's actually when we started getting into the Great War. It's all the prequel stuff that was really slow to start, because we were doing all the introducing characters. That was the only part that seemed really slow for me. But it wasn't so slow that I didn't want to continue, because I had an idea of what the author was doing and just building this. But for someone who is just picking this up because they like historical fiction, it's a little slow to start. But once you get past that, just work your way through it. All of that stuff matters. It's the building blocks of the rest of the story. So for me, it worked, but for a lot of people, it might not work. So I just want to make that a point. So if you do pick up this book, you are aware that you have to give it the grace. You have to give it a little bit of a grace period, but once you're there, you're in it. I promise. There was a slight confusion. There is a romance in this book. We do have a little bit of a romance, which I did appreciate as well, because there's a lot of romance about the Great War. Men going off to war and writing their sweethearts. It's in theory, it sounds really dreamy, but in practice, it probably sucked. So I like the fact that the romance showed the dreaminess quality and the pain that was invoked with romances during this time frame. Except I was slightly confused about where the romance was going, because for a while I thought Celia was into Adrian, and then I felt like maybe she was into Christian, and then I thought they were going to hook her up with Basil. So there was a little bit of confusion about where she was going, and I think maybe that just might have been me. But for me, I was slightly confused where it was going. But once I figured it out, I was there and I wanted it. Okay, I wanted it, but it took me a little bit to get there to figure out who it was, because I knew in the beginning she liked Adrian, but there was some flirtation with Christian, especially at the auction. I was like, whoa, where's this coming from? Are we going to have like a triangle with brothers and the Great War? Holy shit, didn't see that one coming. Didn't happen, but definitely threw me for a loop, which I appreciate, but at the same time, I don't really appreciate being confused on what the romance is. So that was one thing that kind of irked me, but it wasn't a major thing. And as I said earlier, this is told in a very episodic way. Because of that, there are not a lot of very smooth transitions between the episodes. So that could be kind of annoying for people. But if they know this is how the story is told, which you do figure out very, very soon, it's something that can be easily overcome. But it's something that I feel I would have kind of liked to know a little bit earlier than when I did learn it. So, and to make, even though you have these like small episodes, you could still have the transitions a little bit smoother. I thought the transitions were just kind of start and stop, but in hindsight, we are talking about the Great War, where one day everything was fine, the next day it's done. There is no transition to it. It is. So it could not work for some people, but for some people, they might appreciate it. Because there's a romance, I am giving this a spice rating, and I'm giving it a half a chili pepper. Yes, there's a few fade to black scenes. They're not very graphic. They're very, we lay down in bed and then wake up the next morning and put clothes on. Like it's very, there's one where we get a little bit of build up and a little bit of undressing, and that's really nice. That was a really nice scene. I could just picture it by the river and on the blanket. It was very romantic. It was very sweet. And it's just, it made me smile. It made me smile after having all of this depression and pain. This little nugget of physical affection and true romance just thrown in there. It wasn't thrown out of left field. It was definitely there, and it was a build-up, and I didn't even realize it was building up. And I loved that surprise. I loved it. That was great. But we do have a little bit of spice, because we do have a little bit of undressing. So, half a chili pepper. But I would like to point out the flirtation of Christian. That man was adorable. I loved him. I loved him, which made me very sad because what happened to him. Very, very sad. Okay? I was very sad about what happened to him because I loved him. He was my favorite. And then he changes because of the Great War, because the Great War took no prisoners. All right, my final thoughts on Andrew Tweedale's Of All the Faiths and None. If you are a lover of World War I historical fiction, or just World War I in general, learning about it, I think this is a book for you. If you like obscure historical references that you don't hear about in your everyday textbook, this is a book for you because there's a lot of them. Order of the Feather, Castle Drogo, Edwin Lutyens, Theosophy, which I haven't even touched on, but there's a whole spiritual element invoked within this book on behalf of Edwin Lutyens' wife that in and of itself has its own, as a subject, is intriguing as all get out. I don't feel it has that big of a bearing on this book, though. It has more of a bearing in the beginning part, which was the slower part for me. So, but a lot of obscure historical references that are interesting and just give you this bigger picture. And I love historical fiction that can do that. So if you like those kind of things too, you'll appreciate this book. The title, Of All the Faiths and None. Absolutely perfect. It's a perfect title. This book, when it references the title, it is talking about a grave marker or stone that Edwin Lutyens is conscripted to make to kind of symbolize all of the death on the battlefields, Flanders, Poppy, Flanders Fields, all the major battlefields. And he says he's deciding how he wants it to look. And he says, for all the faiths and none. Because there were faithful people in the Great War. There was people who didn't have faith. And there were people who walked in with all the faith and then walked away with none. And there were people who discovered faith while in the trenches. And it is a perfect story because all the faiths are represented, but none of them are represented. And it was a great title choice. Absolutely stunning. I could not have picked a better title for this book. It was great. I loved it. I didn't understand it at first, and now I do. And I love a book where the title, at the end of the story, it all just comes full circle. That's a nice element, a nice surprise. So definitely the title worked in its favor. Really enjoyed it. And then the last thing about this book is the no HEA, or no happy ending. Happily ever after. There isn't one. There wasn't a happy ending with the Great War. It took an entire generation away from us. Now, being as an American, we were only in it for like a year and a half. This is mostly told from the European side, who were really mostly in the trenches. And I like the fact this book doesn't have a happily ever after, because World War I didn't. I'm not going to tell you what happens to all the characters, but everyone in this book is affected. Everyone. Everyone now has a story. And for lack of a better word, they have a sob story. And I know it sounds really crude and insensitive, but it's the only way I can really describe it, because now they have that story that changed them. A sob story is not just something to sit down and cry about. It is a story of your history that physically changes you, mentally changes you, emotionally changes you. And every single character in our story now has that. And you see it in this book. And for as much pain, for as much lack of hope this book gave, I love the fact that they all have their story. They have a defining characteristic of themselves. whether they survived or didn't, whether they were scarred or forgotten. They all have their story. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Andrew Tweedale's Of All the Faiths and None. If you feel so inclined to go check this out, please go check this out. It's definitely something special. A little side note, in his author's note, Andrew Tweedale started writing this book in 2004. I was a junior in high school in 2004, and he finished in 2021. So that's almost 18 years that he spent writing this book, and it shows it. So, Mr. Tweedale, if you ever see this, I am honored to be one of the first people to read your book. Thank you for your story and your contribution to historical fiction. I hope I get to see more from you, but I hope it doesn't have to take another 18 years to get one. So, it was an honor to read your book. Thank you for your characters. Thank you for your story. That's all I have for you guys today. Have a good one.